Well, hey everyone, this is Ron, KC0QVT. I am your host for Ham Radio Heavyweights. This is a new podcast we put together where I interview influential ham radio people and people that are doing some really cool things in ham radio. And I have a special guest on the show today that I have known for probably about 5 or 6 years. This is Jason Johnston, KC5HWB. He is the creator and host of Ham Radio 2.0, What is New in Ham Radio? And at the time of this recording, Jason's got a subscription on YouTube of about 84,000 subs. So I have watched his show grow the last 5 years, and what he's done is quite impressive. And I wanted to get him on the show today because I want you to meet him as well. So how you doing, Jason? Welcome to the show.
I'm doing just fine, Ron. Thanks for having me, man. This is a really cool effort you're putting together. So I'm happy to be a part of the launching platform of it. I know you've done one or two before, but I'm looking forward to seeing how well you grow it.
Absolutely, yeah. It's definitely an effort because I meet a lot of hams at Ham Fest and on the telephone, and some of these guys have some really cool stories. And you're special to me because I've known you pretty much since this thing probably got started with Ham Radio 2.0. So let me kick that off and just ask you, when did you first get licensed in ham radio, and who got you into it?
I've actually been licensed since 1994, so it was about 2020. This coming July to be 27 years, and I was a group of friends and I in high school. This was before I got licensed, but a group of friends and I in high school. Several of us lived in different cities. We kind of grew up together in the same city, and then my folks moved out, and then somebody else's folks moved out, and we all just kind of remained friends. So we didn't live close to one another, and we were always driving to meet each other, and we were always meeting up at places, taking all our own separate cars, and we wanted a way to communicate between the cars. So we decided to put CB radios into the car, and through an effort, and we did that, and we did that for 2 or 3 years, and through an effort and some people we met over the CB radio, one of the guys that we met there said, "Hey, I want to go get my ham radio license. Who's interested?" And I didn't know what it was. I'm like, "Okay, what is that?" The way he described it to me was, it's like CB, but it uses FM instead of AM, and you use repeaters. And I'm like, that sounds great. Let's go do it. So, so I got licensed in 94. I was living in Flower Mound, Texas at the time, which is about 20 minutes north of here. And there was a repeater in Louisville at the Texas Instruments plant. And it's a 2-meter repeater. And I basically talked on that repeater almost every day for like 2 or 3 years. And that's all I did in ham radio was talk on a 2-meter repeater. Back then, the radios were less abundant and higher priced. And so I had an HT for a while, and then I finally got a mobile rig, but it was a monoband 2-meter and hung out there. And then kind of went from there. And over the course of the years, several friends moved away. A couple of the older guys, they passed away, but I've kind of stayed into it off and on for the last couple decades. And I would drop out of it and get back into it and drop out of it every few years. And then I got back into it around 2013 or 14. That was about 2013, I guess. It was about the time I discovered what DMR was actually. And I've been into it pretty heavily ever since. And I can't see myself ever putting it down now.
So 94, were you just out of high school, or were you in high school at that time, or even?
I was in college. I was in college. Yeah, I was in college at that time. Yeah.
Okay. So you went to college then?
I went to college. That's a good way to say it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, cool. And so you're. When I got to know you, it was probably, I know we met in Irving, Texas, at Hamcom, and I think you were doing Grapevine Radio at the time, or maybe I met you over when you were just doing that. You had a website and you were selling some product. Tell me, was that at the same? How did that happen? I guess I could say. How did you get Grapevine Radio? Because you were in Grapevine, Texas, I'm assuming.
Right. Correct. Yeah. And that's still where I live right now. We've been here for about 19 years. So Grapevine Amateur Radio basically came out of, I've always had kind of an entrepreneurial spirit, and I've had a number of businesses, small businesses over the course of my life. And I tell people my first ever job was actually mowing lawns. I started mowing lawns. Me and a buddy of mine I think we were in junior high school, 7th grade at the time. what they call middle school now, I guess. We started mowing lawns together. He was 12, and I would think I was 12 or 13, something like that. And we started mowing lawns together. We did that for 5 years. So I didn't have a real job until I was like 17, because I was working for myself every summer and, during the off season, whatnot. So I've always kind of had a very self-employed entrepreneurial type spirit. So when I discovered and this was back before we have an HRO in North Texas now. So this was back before we had any ham radio stores in the North Texas area at all. And I thought, there's some of these Chinese radios, which are really new on the market at the time. They don't have representation at some of these ham radio shops. And even if they did, we don't have a ham radio shop here. So I contacted a few of those vendors and asked them if I could buy in bulk, and they would offer me like a wholesale price. And some of them said yes, and some of them said no. So I started selling a couple of those just kind of to make some extra money so I could buy more ham radios is basically the reason I did it. And I was selling, one of the first radios I ever sold was the TYT TH9800. Which I still have that radio. I haven't used it in a while, but I still it's on the shelf right over there. And and I kept getting questions upon questions upon questions about that were all basically the same. People would email me or they'd call me and they're like, "Hey, I'm trying to figure this out. How do you program it for repeater offset? How do you program the PL tone? How do you do this? And I'm like, okay. And I'd tell them, and then they'd hang up. Okay, thanks. And then that same question kept popping up over and over again. So I recorded a video on my phone with no microphone, ambient microphone. It was actually sitting against that desk right there that looked totally different at the time, but that's where it was. And no terrible lighting. And I would write down cue cards and hold them in front of the camera because I didn't know how to do video editing at the time. And I just made it's like a 15 or 18 minute video. It says, here's how you program the TYT TH9800 from the front panel. Of course, you can use software if you want to. Here's how you do it from the front panel. And just went through and punched a bunch of buttons. And I uploaded the video to YouTube. And I basically forget. That was around August of 2013. August of 2014. And I basically forgot about it for 5 or 6 months. Every time someone would call me, I say, here's a link. I got a YouTube video. Go here. Okay. I'd send it to people in email. Okay. I guess somewhere around Christmas of that year, something like that, I went back and looked at YouTube. And that video had like 10 or 12,000 views on it. And I'm like, where did that come from? Because there's no way I talked to that many people over email or over the phone about so people were finding it on their own, in other words. It was about that time I came up with the idea. I was like, well, maybe ham radio videos on YouTube is a thing. And a bunch of the guys in my local club that I'm still a member of, they used to watch Ham Nation, live Ham Nation on twit.tv every Wednesday. And that was kind of fun. A lot of that stuff at the time was over my head. But I didn't know about any actual YouTube channels. So I started searching YouTube. I found Gary Pierce's show that he calls Ham Radio Now. I started following him early on, and a couple of the other smaller guys. And then I just decided to start making videos about whatever I wanted to make videos about. And I put them up. I officially named the channel and uploaded my first video with the name Ham Radio 2.0 in May of 2015. And then fast forward 6 years, and here we are today. I just kind of kept going with it, and it blossomed into what it is today, which I never expected at all. That, my gosh, I mean, there's a lot of people out there itching for ham radio advice and ham radio how-tos. And it's really incredible. It's incredible, and it's humbling that people actually come by and actually want to watch my videos now. So that's just kind of how it happened. Absolutely.
Well, so Ham Radio 2.0 morphed out of Grapevine Radio. Okay. And when we met in Irving, did you already have Ham Radio 2.0 at that time, or were you just dabbling at that time?
I think I was just dabbling at that time. I don't remember what year that was, whether that was 2014 or 2015. HamCom always happened in June.
Okay.
So it's very possible, since I put my first official Ham Radio 2.0 video up in May of 2015, it's very possible I had it then, if that's the year we met, because it would have been about a month later. But the first year and a half, I just kind of threw stuff up there when I wanted to. Still couldn't video edit to save my life. I used Windows Movie Maker, which is a terrible program. I don't even think they make it anymore. I mean, it's better than writing out cue cards and holding it in front of the camera, but it took me several episodes to get a good audio and better lighting and all this kind of good stuff. So it's very much trial and error in the early days. But yes, what you said is correct. It's the sales business, which I shut down about 2 years after that, morphed, it created the YouTube idea and channel. And once YouTube really kind of started to take off, I'm like, you know what? There's a lot of people out there now selling ham radios. I mean, you can get a lot of stuff on Amazon. Main Trading Company is a great vendor of radios. They're about 2 hours outside of North Texas. They're 2 hours from Grapevine. And so they're not actually in the Metroplex. It kind of takes a little bit to get there, but they sell that stuff. And I'm like, you know what? There's a lot of people doing that, and they're doing it better than I am because they're doing it full time. And I'm just going to let those people have that. And I shut down the sales business because YouTube was really kind of taken off at that point. And I just have been doing that by itself for about 3 years now, I guess it is.
Okay, yeah, cool. That's cool how that started. Now, so let's go ahead and get into Ham Radio 2.0 because that's what you're doing right now. And now, are you doing the channel right now full time? Is this a
Yes.
full time gig for you? Okay, and you
Yes.
left a career in, I think it was IT, or
Yeah.
What did you do?
Well, I mean, that was basically COVID because I had a job with a software company as a recruiter for software engineers. And they hired me because of my IT background. So this wasn't actually in IT. It was in what they called sourcing or I lost the word now. A recruiter. That's the word I'm looking for. I wasn't a recruiter, but I was kind of like an assistant recruiter. And I would find people and give them a quick interview, and I would know how to talk to them in the IT speak. So so I did that for about a year and a half. And at the end of 2019, I guess it was, I voluntarily quit that job because I had another IT job lined up to start around February of 2020. Well, about that time is when things started shutting down. China never came back from their 2-week Chinese New Year holiday. They stayed out of the office for like 2 or 3 months. Yep. The United States started to shut down around mid to late March, early April, something like that. And that job just kind of never blossomed. And so at the time I told my wife, I was like, I've got to take all this extra time I've got now, and I got to try to put it into YouTube because, I was already wanting to do it full time, but it wasn't nearly the volume or the size of the channel that I needed at the time. But I tell you what, and I'd like to tell people I'm psychic, but I'm not. 2020 was just a fantastic year because when everyone got stuck at home, a fantastic year for YouTube, I should say. It wasn't really a fantastic year for most people.
No.
But people, and a lot of YouTube channels really exploded. There was a lot of interest in amateur radio that really exploded during 2020 because people were at home. They had more time in their hands. There is that fear factor that came in there for the prepper aspect. And that's all well and good, but that's not the only thing that happened. So the number of amateur radio licensees and upgrades we saw during 2020 had a big spike. The number of people sitting at home and watching YouTube had a big spike, and the channel just really, really exploded around May of last year. April or May of last year. And it's been a full-time job to keep up with it ever since then, quite frankly. So I didn't actually plan to. I had always hoped I might be able to go full-time on YouTube, but I didn't really plan to do it so soon. And it just kind of like happened that way because of world events going on at the time. And now if someone called me and offered me a job, I'd be like, well, you're going to have to pay me quite a bit because I really like working for myself. I don't make as much now as I did in my last job, but my overhead's much less. I don't have to drive to work every day. And we cut some expenses in a couple of other places in my household, and it works out for the better, I think. So I really enjoy doing this right now.
Well, that's really cool because just to make our listeners and viewers aware, we partnered up a couple years at Hamvention. Your show was just Ham Radio 2.0. I remember the shirts you have on when you just started making those shirts, and you had a quarter of the booth, and you'd bring folks in to interview, and that's really what I saw at first was your ability to go around and just talk to influencers, and you're talking to a lot of the folks that have businesses in the amateur radio community. So talking about your channel, because when I look at it, I see you're doing product reviews, I see you interviewing people, and now it looks to me like you're traveling, you're getting out and meeting other influencers as well. So it looks like this channel has just taken you in a lot of places that you probably never thought it would. And so with that said, I mean, it's transformed your life. So what, if you had to say one particular influencer or business owner that you've met over the last several years since you've started the channel that you really enjoyed talking to, who would you say that'd be? Or is it...
As far as influencers or like
Well, I'm thinking like, you've probably met Bob Heil, for example. Or he's a guy that's done some really cool things as an entrepreneur. And then of course, there's a lot of these other guys. You mentioned, was it Ham Nation? I think you said you used to listen to those guys. I think that he's got a decent show.
Yes.
So
yeah, I get, I've met Bob Heil once in person, and I've talked to him on the phone a couple of times. I actually met him through R&L Electronics. R&L Electronics out of Ohio. They have a good relationship with Bob Heil, and Roger out there. He called me and he said, in fact, early on, Roger reached out to me. Roger at R&L, he is the owner of the company. Like 3 years ago, he reached out to me. He's like, how does one become a sponsor on your show? And I'm like, it's a good question. I've never had one before.
Tell the listeners, how would you sponsor your show, right? Yeah.
So, well, and at this point in time, I have about 5 sponsors, and and some of them send me product to reviews, and sometimes they let me keep it and give it away, and sometimes they let me borrow it and I have to send it back. And sometimes I'll just buy stuff outright because it's just like, I know that I'm going to make a video on this. I know it's going to be a popular video. And I know that 3 to 6 months from now, I'm going to make a follow-up video on it and say, here's how it works. Here's what I've done with it since it was brand new in the box. But Roger and R&L, he reached out to me pretty early on. He wasn't actually my first sponsor. My first sponsor was Gifts for Hams, Kelly Laser Works. They make plaques and call sign lighted signs. The lighted sign that's flashing right there over my head is made by them. They made this for me, that kind of thing. They make really cool stuff. But the first sponsor I ever officially had for radio gear was R&L. And he called me, this was probably about a year ago. He called me, said, he goes, we've always had a good relationship with Bob Heil. If I send you some of his stuff, would you do a review on it? And I said, sure, that's fine. So he sent me a couple of things that I did review and sent back to him. And then I had a question one time, and I emailed Roger. I was like, hey, what do you do? How do you set this setting and this and this? And like 30 minutes later, my phone rings. I answer the phone. It's Bob Heil. And I'm like, okay. He's like, hey, I heard you had a question about this microphone. I'm like, yeah. So I got to talk to him for the first time on the phone. And I've talked to him 1 or 2 times since then, but definitely him. I would probably be, quite frankly, Ron, BridgeCom, I'm not just saying this, BridgeCom was there early on. I used to do, you guys used to have that little monoband HT 220 HT that you sold.
The BCH 220.
Yeah. I've still got mine floating around here at some time. We've always had a big 220 megahertz repeater network in the North Texas area. So you guys were some of the first to actually kind of push the 220, at least here in the last several years. And I got one time, I think we were at HamCom and Tim was there. Tim, the guy that used to work for you. And he brought me one of your 220 mobile radios and let me roll. He's like, if I gave you this, would you be able to do a video on it tonight and bring it back tomorrow? And I said, sure. So I went home that night from HamCom because it's just 30 minutes up the road. Did that video, came back, and I was like, it's pretty cool to do some stuff for BridgeCom. That was, you guys have really exploded since then also, but people knew who you were back then. You were coming to HamCom and saw you at Hamvention every year. And so definitely BridgeCom was there in the early days of my YouTube show. And then, I think probably one of the most influential people I've met is probably Bob Greenberg, W2CYK. And he's got this idea to put an Android radio a DMR radio, a dual band handheld radio into the back of an Android device. And I actually had that idea like 10 years ago. This was back before I knew what DMR was. My idea was just to say, why doesn't someone make an HT that's Android controlled? It's like, hey, that'd be a good idea.
Is this RF Finder?
Yeah.
Our
okay,
Finder. Yeah. I've actually met Bob at.
You've met him. Yeah,
I've met him a few times. In fact, I got to go to Nearfest. They have it twice a year, and our trade show booths were right next to each other, and it was a decent attended show, but I was up there for another. Actually, it's up there in Boston for a race. And was able to go to the Nearfest at the same time, business and pleasure, and so Bob and I's trade show booths were right next to each other, so I got to talk to him, and that's right when he just started moving the RF Finder. Yeah,
and I think it was a QST article that I had seen. It might have been an ad on QRZ. I don't remember exactly where I saw an ad for his somewhere. And and this was like 4 years ago. And I reached out to him. I just sent him an email. I went and found his website, sent him an email, say, hey, I run this YouTube channel. I sent him the link to it. And I said, I'd like to interview you about your new product. This was right before the first version had come out. And he calls me. He was actually in London at the time. He calls me and he's like, hey, I'm interested in doing that. Let me know a good time. And I talked to him for 10 or 15 minutes. And I said, okay, that's fine. I'll let you know. So I checked my schedule. I sent him an email. I said, hey, let's meet at this time. And he said, okay. And we got on a Zoom call. I think it was actually a Skype call back then. And he, at the beginning of it, the part I didn't put in the video, he's like, you're like the fourth or fifth person to reach out to me and want to interview me about this device. He goes, but you're the first one to ever set an appointment and actually call me back. So let's go. I'm like, cool. So I don't know if I had the first video on YouTube about the RF Finder device when it was brand new, but I had one of the first ones out there. So I know Eric at Ham Radio Concepts has interviewed Bob a couple times as well. So, but yeah, Bob's a good dude. Went and spent about a week with him in Long Island. He lives up in Long Island. I spent a week with him last month when I was on a road trip. Really good guy, really supportive of the hobby, very much into the hobby. He doesn't just run the business and go home at night and forget about ham radio. He does a lot of stuff in HF radio, DXpeditions and whatnot. So he's definitely been an influence because he kind of married the world of Android and IT together with DMR and analog radio. And it's one of the things, we hear a lot about SDR HF radios, which are really fun to play with, but you don't hear much about that in the VHF, UHF world. So it's good to see someone kind of working at it from that angle as well.
Interestingly, I was bringing up a hotspot in the shop one day, and I think we were on DMR Worldwide, and Bob was on the channel, and I actually had the opportunity to jump in there because I think he was working this RF Finder at the time, just doing some testing and stuff, and I had a QSO with him, and I shared with him. I said, hey, do you remember me? Do you remember me from Nearfest? And then, of course, I met him again at, I think it was, you guys were together at Hamcation.
Hamcation, probably,
That was the last pretty big ham fest that we've had before COVID. It was last,
correct.
2020. Yeah, you guys were down there. And, I think that device is really cool. For the money, it does a lot of stuff, and especially that you can download effectively all. You don't have to go out and build a code plug. I think. It's one of the things it boasts about. So, which is definitely a challenge. You talk about educating folks, and I get that. We do a lot of educating here, and it's challenging because DMR is a new frontier for folks. Well, I was going to take this another direction, but let me back up a moment and talk about 220 real quick, because your point of 220 is an interesting one because, as you know, we got in 220 about 2015. I put out a repeater and then, of course, a mobile, thinking, because I'd go to Hamcation early days for us, and you guys got a 220 repeater? Do you have a 220 repeater? And I'm thinking, man, well, of course I didn't. But at the time, a 220 repeater seemed like it was on everybody's radar. But, we've been making those for quite a while now, and we just don't see it, taking off like, I thought it would. We still have the equipment, but what is your take on 220? And even after, since, having that platform, or I should say that big network in your area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I get that question on several of every time I do a new radio about 220, I get that question. I'm like, 220 is, I'd say it's very regionalized. The regions that have it are usually pretty active in it. And the regions that don't have it, they're like, oh, is that still a thing? Yeah. So it's very hot and cold. Not that people don't like it, but it's just that it just doesn't exist in some places. I mean, you can travel pretty much anywhere in the United States and find a 2-meter repeater semi close to you, or maybe if you go to a metropolitan area, you find 2 or 3 dozen of them. But 220, some areas just don't have it at all. And some areas have, I say we have a network in North Texas. And what I mean by that is we have a lot of independent repeaters up. Some of them are, some of the guys are starting to connect their stuff via All-Star. Some of them are, some of them have Echolink, I think. But for the most part, most of them are just independent, not non-internet connected repeaters. So it's not really a network. But there's enough repeaters out there between Dallas and Fort Worth and north of, really north of or south of the Oklahoma border and north of, like, say, the Corsicana area. There's enough repeaters out there where you can drive around and be on a 220 machine pretty much anywhere. And the noise floor is so low on that band that you can almost get into any other repeater in the area from any place in the Metroplex also, kind of give and take a little bit. But, I think that I think the biggest problem with 220 is that there's just not enough radios out there for it. People want to put up a repeater, and everybody wants to do it on 2 meters. And someplace like North Texas, you can't get a frequency pair on 2 meters. You can't get a registered frequency pair on 2 meters, not a coordinated pair anyway. And because they're all either being used or someone's sitting on them or something like that, and they don't do a very good job of recycling them when they stop getting used. So it really kind of depends on that sort of thing. But 220, you can get a repeater pair like almost anytime you want to, but there's just not the abundance of radios out there. And even some of the big manufacturers aren't really making, like ICOM doesn't make a 220 radio at all right now. They have in the past, but they don't right now at all right now. The Yaesu, I don't think, has one right now. Kenwood D74 was a 220 radio, the most expensive HT on the market, but it's been discontinued because of the shortages right now. Alenco's got a really good 220 mobile radio, but and then you got a lot of the Chinese manufacturers that are making 220. But I think someone with a big name needs to get into it and do a little bit more with it. And if that were to happen again, you might kind of see a spike and stuff going on with 220. But I like it because it's a low noise floor. It works very well. You can, my buddy Kent, WA5YXS, he's a good friend of mine. He and I have done some 220 simplex on 223.500. No repeaters, no All-Star, no nothing. Fantastic range on that band, driving around North Texas, just because the noise floor is almost non-existent. So I think that anybody who's thinking about getting into 220, I would tell you, be the ambassador in your area for it. Go get one, see how it works, get you and your buddy to get one and start using simplex. Forget about repeaters for a minute, start using simplex and see how great it is. And then once you get people interested in it, then go in together and buy yourself a repeater and put a repeater up. And you can put one repeater in a small town or small county and it'll cover the whole area. So, because the noise floor is so great. So
no doubt.
I think it's an excellent mode.
We've been pushing it, but maybe not as hard as we should. I think early days we were pushing it, and we were selling it, and there was a small awakening. But it's challenging to promote it, and I understand why the bigger players don't get involved in it, because obviously they got to make a profit, and there has to be a market for it. And as you know, like you said, if you can get a pair pretty quick, that. There's probably not a lot of demand like there is in 2 meter and 440. Well, let's go ahead and pivot. I want to pivot to your channel, because, that's to me one of the most impressive things about what you've done. And we touched on it earlier with the, this Ham Radio 2.0. You're at 84,000 subs now, which is pretty impressive. I remember, when you were just breaking through like 10, and that was and so, you've gotten a lot of exposure. And one of the places that seems like is QRZ.com. Seems like they simulcast a lot of your shows. I mean, how are they doing that? Are they picking them up at random, or are they seeing something that somebody on that channel likes to see? Or how do you get into their news feed?
So are you talking about QRZ.com or QRZnow.com?
I'm sorry if I misspoke. I meant QRZ.com.
QRZ. Okay. No, that's what you said. I just wanted to make sure because I get asked about QRZnow.com.
I know there's that one as well. And I don't know if that one picks you up or not. I know there's a lot of folks that, well, I don't know about QRZnow.com as far as like how much traffic they get, but I know QRZ.com.
QRZ. Yeah.
Yeah.
So QRZ. Right. Okay. So QRZ is it's a great place to get information about stuff like that. No, the way that, to answer your question, the way that you get on QRZ is you have to go manually post your stuff on QRZ. So there's a news articles forum, and there's a video and podcasters forum that some people post in there. And I learned this by just doing it, because a lot of people would come in and say, why do you keep putting your stuff on the front page of QRZ.com? The people who post news articles on QRZ anywhere in the forums, the people who I post my own stuff on there, but the people who post in the forums have absolutely no control whatsoever over what gets put on the front page of that website. That is all up to the admins of QRZ. And I've traded a lot of direct messages with Fred, the owner of QRZ, the CEO of QRZ. And I said, what do you want to see here? How do you do this? And what's your thought on this? And really nice guy. In fact, he's supposed to be coming on to the channel to do an interview with me at some point in the future. But basically what it is in a nutshell, anyone can go post on QRZ.com in the news forums, news articles. I think there's a DX forum. There's a video and podcasters forum. There's a satellite forum. There's a lot of different forums out there. Anybody can go post out there. Your post does have to be approved. So when you type it out and put it up and click on submit, it goes to a moderator. The moderator is going to either approve it or not approve it. And if they don't approve it, they usually tell you why. And usually it has to be something like it's rude or it's political in nature or something is like not along the lines of what needs to be on QRZ. But generally speaking, when you put up something about ham radio and it's, it gives a positive influence to the hobby, then they're going to approve it to get posted. But from there, they decide, this might be front page worthy. And they put it on the front page. I have no control over whatsoever about how many of my articles do and don't get on the front page of that website. And neither does anybody else. That's all up to the admins. And a lot of times I get people coming by and they say, well, how come there's 4 of your articles on the front page right now? I'm like, I don't know. Ask the admins because I have no control over that. So, and I think, it's kind of a catch-22 because I have so many videos on YouTube and I have a lot of special guests and famous guests on my channel. And sometimes I'll talk about some more controversial topics, as it were. And that stuff drives traffic. And I think that's pretty much how the admins do the spots. Ham Nation's constantly got articles on the front of QRZ.com because everyone knows who Ham Nation is. Several of the other YouTubers have articles out there because people know who they are and people follow them. They have a following, they have an audience, they have interesting things to say about different aspects of the hobby that people are actually interested in. Nobody's going to click on a front page article if I was to show you, hey, these are the tires I have on my truck today. What's that have to do with ham radio? They're not going to put that on the front page. But if I'm interviewing Bob Heil or I had Michael Coulter and Tim Duffy on my channel about a week and a half ago, and talking to them about Contest University, which is upcoming, and Hamvention, the virtual Hamvention forums, and then the Hamvention QSO party, which is also upcoming. And I put that on QRZ. In fact, Michael from Hamvention, he's like, are you going to post this to QRZ? And I said, oh, yeah, I'm going to post this to QRZ. And I did. And within like a day of me posting it, the admins put it on the front page because people are interested in Hamvention. So it's kind of one of those things where if you have something that you think is going to be popular among the audience of QRZ, then the admins kind of pick it to be up there. There's a bunch of stuff I've posted to QRZ that never made it to the front page. And, and that's okay. That's okay. I mean, I don't only post stuff there to try to make it to the front page. Yes, I do get more exposure if it does, but people are coming along, commenting on it and watching the video, regardless of whether it's on the front page or not. So I'm always happy to share information like that, but yeah, good site if you're wanting to find information, they've got an excellent swap pages. If you're looking to sell or buy something, a great place to buy ham radio equipment that doesn't cost you 10% eBay commissions if you want to sell something. So good overall site for sure.
Well, I think it speaks to the content you're creating. The fact that the quality of the content is, that is stuff people want to consume. You're reviewing a lot of products out there that folks are interested in. And of course, you're doing interviews. And I think that speaks to why it's getting picked up. But as a result of that, your channel's growing in subscribers. More and more people are getting aware of you and what you've been doing. And, that leads me to ask, when you're taking on a project, for example, a radio, or want to review a new radio or interview an influencer or somebody that's doing something in the hobby. Can you speak to what it is you're doing now as far as are you doing all your own scheduling and your own editing of the videos and are you still the guy that's doing all the back end work and everything still?
Yep. Doing everything myself.
That's great.
I don't know if that's good or bad, but that's how it's happening. So,
well, you seem very busy. I think you're sitting around 700 and some odd videos now.
Yeah.
I don't know. I looked before we did the show here, and you put out a lot of content, and you're the primary editor of all that stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, are you willing to take on just about anything that has anything to do with ham radio as far as product reviews, or do you are you selective whether or not you want to review a particular product, or is there something like we beat that horse to death, or how do you select what you do and schedule your week for stuff you put out?
I like to, the tagline of my channel is what is new in amateur radio. Yeah. So I pretty much like to do anything that's new, whether it's a product or a mode or a firmware upgrade to a product that I've already done or something like that, new antenna, whatever. So I take a pretty serious look at everything I see that is new, that's actually new, that I think might be beneficial or people might want to look at. And a lot of that is, and sometimes I'll put up a video that I think, oh, this is going to be a really cool product. And the video just doesn't really go anywhere. Even though the product is fantastic. And sometimes I'll put up a video about something. I'll say, oh, well, I'm talking about this item today, and it will just explode. So, it's still kind of hard to predict, but I'd say I'm probably 70, maybe 75% successful in being able to predict what is and is not going to just because I've been doing it for so long. So I kind of know what the audience is looking for. And I kind of know what people on YouTube are searching for just because I've been doing it for so long. So yeah, I mean, if it's new, I will take a look at it for sure. But some of the new products that I've really enjoyed, some of them don't get a lot of airtime or a lot of watch time, and some of them do. So it's just kind of one of those things where, you gotta take the good with the bad, which is, I mean, I say bad. It's not really bad. If I put up a video and it gets 2,000 views in the first day, then that's pretty good for a channel my size. If I put up one and it gets 2,000 views in the first month, then that's not as good, but that doesn't mean that there's still people watching it. There's still 2,000 people who watched that this month. So it's still something that people want to see. So I'm glad it's on the channel. And that's kind of where I try to shoot from.
One of the things that I'm seeing you do now is you're getting out and you're traveling and doing some projects that the channel looks like it's financing, or it's the reason that you're able to get around. I think you just did a de-expedition. Is that true? Or
no, we haven't done that since before COVID. So
okay.
I did do last month. I did a road trip. I drove out
maybe
to.
That's what I saw.
Yeah. Last month I did a road trip. I got in the truck and I drove to North Carolina. I took about 3 days to get there, and on purpose. I made several stops, several planned stops along the way, and I met up with a club called Ham Radio Adventures. They're just hamradioadventures.com, and what they do is they do parks on the air, summits on the air, rare grid squares. They're going to be doing a rare grid square this August, I think it is, up in the Pacific Northwest, up like north of Seattle somewhere, I think it is. And but they go out in the world and do ham radio adventures. They've been wanting to do an overseas something, but because of the lockdowns, they haven't been able to do that yet. But that's probably going to be upcoming at some point next year. But I do like Parks on the Air has been really big over the last. Well, it's kind of been in existence since 2017, I think it was what it was, and people really enjoy Parks on the Air. There's 2 or 3 guys who have channels that they've basically built out of doing Parks on the Air videos. Parks on the Air is a fun time because it allows all those folks with HOA restricted homes they live in, or at neighborhoods they live in, or who live in an apartment or a condo who can't put up an HF antenna. They can go out into the field, they can set up a portable op, and they can call CQ Parks on the Air, and people come back to them like they're almost working a DXpedition. You know, you will work pileups when you're doing Parks on the Air. And it's one of the few times inside of the United States that you can say that. And it's a daily, and you can do it every day. You can do it every day. And there's no certain weekend or certain time of the year you can do it. You can do it every day if you want to. And there's a lot of people out there who will call back to you who are looking to do what they call chasers or chasers. So who want to do contact all those folks going into the park, making the Parks on the Air contacts. They'll be sitting at home in the shack and try to contact as many of those folks as they can. So there's people from both sides of it that are really enjoying just getting on the HF airwaves and making those contacts. And that's where the idea of this road trip came from. I went to North Carolina, did several parks while I was up there with the guys. And then my friend Frank and I, we broke off. We went to Virginia and activated some parks. We went up to New York and spent a week with Bob and activated some parks. And then I came back and then Frank flew home and I drove back by myself and I stopped in Huntsville, Alabama, visited Gigaparts for about a day, activated one of the parks in Huntsville. And then I came home after the next day I drove home. So, but that was basically a road trip to do a bunch of Parks on the Air activations is what it was. And it's fun to do them in other states and say, okay, now I've done all these parks in, like, instead of just 1 or 2 states, I've got like a dozen states I've done parks activations in. It's just kind of a fun part of the hobby that a lot of people really enjoy. And those videos seem to be popular on my channel and several other channels as well.
Well, that's what it seems like you're doing with the videos you've been creating. You're almost driving some trends, or you're helping expose people to these various segments of the hobby. Parks on the Air, Summits on the Air. You're talking HF, and then of course I know that you and I both know a lot about the DMR trend that's underway in ham radio right now, and the digital modes and stuff. What do you see right now happening is if you were to pick one particular trend that's kind of dominating, or if there is one, what would you say would be that right now, given your travels?
That's a hard question to answer. I think that one of the cool things about amateur radio is that there's so many different things you can do, and there's so many different things that are growing. So I think HF is growing. We got some really awesome new and newish radios that have hit the scene in the last few years. The ICOM IC7300, of course, is one of the top ones. That brand new radio from Yaesu, the FTDX10, is a fantastic rig. Got several of the Chinese vendors making QRP rigs now. A lot of people using QRP to go up on summits, on mountaintops and whatnot. I think you're seeing a trend of people getting out in the field and doing field radio, parks, summits, just field radio, whatever. Partially because people are tired of being stuck at home. Partially because it's just, people are realizing how fun it is. But at the same time, I see DMR growing, and I see, the brand new ICOM IC705 has D-Star in it. That mode's still in existence and not going anywhere anytime soon. So there's still people doing digital voice modes, D-Star, DMR system fusion. We got a couple of P25 repeaters here in North Texas that are on ham radio frequencies. So I think there's growth in multiple areas, honestly. I think that as far as how they relate and which one's growing more, I don't really know. I don't know that I've ever actually researched that question, but it's good to see that there's not one area growing and the other dwindling. What I see is multiple areas growing, and whether one's growing faster than the other. I can't say, but all of them are growing, or all the ones I'm aware of are growing. So I think it's a good thing for amateur radio in general.
Well, it certainly helps you get a lot of content and finds opportunity to profile certain products and also other businesses. One of the things I also noticed that you're doing is you look like you've made a lot of friends in the YouTuber community that are doing ham radio topics. I've noticed you guys get together, and I remember you guys had a powwow in front of our trade show booth at Dayton, where you brought all these guys together. Is this somewhat of a friendly rivalry of sorts, or are you guys all kind of helping each other succeed?
No, we're helping each other succeed. It was actually, you mentioned Dayton. That's kind of where it all started. Dayton of 2019. I knew a couple of the guys. I had traded email. Of course, Eric from Ham Radio and Concepts and we had met up at Hamcation 2 or 3 years in a row, 2017, 18, and 19, I think. He lives in Florida, so Hamcation is just like an hour and a half drive for him, I think is what it is. But he's pretty close to that event, however far the drive is. So I met up with him 2 or 3 times, and at Hamvention of last year, which is our 2 years ago, I guess now, the 2019 Hamvention, the last one we had. I met up with 2 or 3 guys for the first time there. Mike K at MRD was one of them. Josh from Ham Radio Crash Course, he was there, and a couple other guys with like really small channels at the time, and they kind of got influenced to start doing some more stuff. And we all kind of met up, not really as a planned thing. We just kind of like we all kind of showed up at the show because Hamvention is the biggest ham fest in the world, really. And I saw Josh, and Josh was with Sterling, and Mike met up with us later, and Frank came up the next day, and we just all kind of were like, and Josh was like, hey, we're going to go out to this craft beer bar tonight, and you guys are invited. And I'm like, okay. So a bunch of his people came out, and a lot of us got all met up there, and it just kind of snowballed. Dave Kassler was actually there that night as well. And it just kind of like, it was like, hey, man, we should do some stuff together. And I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah. So when that weekend was over, I got home, and I'm like, it's I didn't want it to turn into one of those things where you meet a bunch of people and you're like, hey, we should get together. And then 5 years later, oh yeah, we never did that, did we? So I just emailed everybody who was there, and I'm like, hey guys, let's all come onto my channel. I invite all you guys onto my channel. We'll come into a Zoom call, and we're going to all talk about the channels that we have and what we focus on. And all but like 1 or 2 of the guys were like, yeah, let's do that. And there was probably like 6 or 8 of us at that first time. And I invited them all to my channel. We recorded a Zoom session similar to what you and I are doing right now. And at the end of that recording, now I'd shut the camera off, or stopped recording, and we talked for another 15 or 20 minutes. And I said, hey, I appreciate it. I appreciate you guys. I hope we can meet up again next year or something like that. And somebody said, well, why don't we do this again next month? And I'm like, okay, who's up for that? And everybody's like, oh yeah, let's do this again. So it turned into this thing that I was just going to do a one-time thing. And I was happy that everyone thought it was that cool. And it just kind of turned into this thing where now we produce videos together. We live stream together. We do back-to-back premieres together. We've met up at a couple of ham fests since then. Several of us went to Orlando Hamcation last year before the shutdown started. We would have all been at Dayton last year and the year before, or well, this month and last year. We were going to do some stuff at Dayton together. There's going to be a huge group of us going to Huntsville in August because it's going to be the first greatest ham fest that's actually open in 2021. Or yeah, that's the year we in, right? 2021. I know what year it is, man.
Yeah, so we've all been caged up.
Right, exactly. So we all met by happenstance. It was my idea for us to meet up one time. Everyone else took it and run with it. I can't take credit for that. And from there, it's just kind of been like, hey, let's just obliterate YouTube with ham radio content and get people interested in amateur radio. And that's basically the theme behind what we all try to do.
Well, I can see it. I mean, it's on your channel, and it's really cool to see that you've brought all those guys together. I'm familiar with their channels as well. Is Dave Kassler, is he a member of that as well? Or is he, I know he's got he kind of focuses on a lot of HF training and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dave has been invited several times. Generally speaking, when we get together, he's got some kind of scheduling conflict. He's come on to 1 or 2 of my live streams, and we have him on we have schedule we keep with what time everyone's doing something. And he's on our schedule just so we know not to schedule anything over the top of him, just to try to be respectful of his time. But yeah, I mean, technically he is, but we've never been able to make our schedules mesh together quite yet.
Well, it looks like, you guys all bring your own unique personalities to the table in terms of how you look at the hobby and the products you're reviewing or whatever. Another thing that I've seen that's going on, especially in the YouTube world, is you have this ham radio space, and then you have this GMRS space, and then you have what looks like a prepper space. That there's a lot of folks into the prepper market, for whatever reason, and there's a lot of radios that get involved in that. And I'm just curious, what is your take on any of this crossover, or is there a crossover where you've got the prepper community along with ham radio, or is there any kind of connection there? What's your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's an absolute connection and there's an absolute overlap. And that's not, a lot of the Jeep community, the off-roading guys, the what they call wheelers, or some of them call wheelers, those guys traditionally were into CBs and have realized that they can get better range and better reception with GMRS. There's this new big push for what's called overlanding, which I didn't even know what that was when I looked it up. I had to basically it's just overlanding in a nutshell. There's a lot more to it than this, but overlanding in a nutshell is going off-road with your vehicle and then using your vehicle as a campsite, using your vehicle as like setting up a tent on top of your truck or turning your truck bed into a tent, living off grid, that kind of thing. And those guys, a lot of times will use GMRS. I just recently joined a group called Overland Bound, which has different sub groups in throughout the nation in various areas. And they really push all of their members. I think it's like $30 a year to join their membership, which I just did. They push all of their members to get their amateur radio license. So they use GMRS, yes, but they're like, ham radio is where it's at. Ham radio is better for these reasons, which I'll agree with. And some people don't agree with that, and that's okay. You want to do GMRS, there's nothing wrong with that. But there's a big push with Overland Bound for people to get their ham radio license. And I think you're going to be seeing a lot more of that. Yeah, there's a prepper push. There's what we call adjacent amateur radio categories. Josh from Ham Radio Crash Course, he said it's the best. He said it the best way I've heard it yet. He's like, I like meeting up with all these adjacent categories of people who don't know their hams yet. And I'm like, you know what? That's a good way to look at it. People who don't know their hams yet. And because there's a lot of groups like that out there that if they understood the value of ham radio, if they knew it was still a thing, a lot of them just like, oh, my grandpa used to do that back in the 60s. And do I need to put a 60-foot tower on the back of my Jeep to use ham radio? Well, no, you don't. You don't understand how different bands and modes work. So once they kind of understand how it works today, then they're like, hey, this is a great tool that we can use. So I think you're going to see a lot of overlap. I've got, I interviewed a guy with a YouTube channel called the Urban Prepper. His name is Cliff. I brought him on my channel a couple weeks ago. He's got about just over 200,000 subscribers on his channel. I've been talking with 2 or 3 different overlanding groups who are going to come onto the channel, and we're going to talk about what is overlanding, what does it entail, how do you get started if you want to do this sort of thing? And then, of course, we're going to talk about radio comms once, because a lot of these guys will go out in their individual vehicles, but there'll be like 8 or 10 or 12 of them meet up. So there's a big caravan of vehicles going down the road. So, and it's fine if you're all on the highway on a flat surface, CBs work just fine that way. But once you get out in the woods on the side of a mountain, some people are over here, some people are over there, all of a sudden you realize that radio comms might be kind of restricted by mountain ranges, tall trees, or wherever you're going, that kind of thing. So it's important to know that if you want to be able to communicate once you get out there. And cell coverage is very sparse out there as well. Sometimes, depending on where you're going. So yeah, I think there's a very large opportunity in multiple adjacent communities like that to get people interested and licensed with amateur radio. And that's kind of one of the things that I've been starting to focus on, sort of in 2020 when things kind of started to all shut down. But now in 2021, at the end of last year, I kind of sat down and thought, okay, what do I want to do this year? And that's one of the things I'm really kind of starting to focus on, because it is going to help to grow the channel. I mean, and that is a focus of mine, yes, but it is also going to help to grow ham radio and get people interested in ham radio, get more people licensed to ham radio. And I think that's really the primary goal of the channel, honestly.
Well, one of the things that I'm seeing about your efforts is how it's caused you to see so many other opportunities that were never there, at least at the front end. I mean, you're now talking about, this cross-pollination between various comms. You're meeting people that are into all kinds of different sports, but ham radio seems like it's got a place, or it could have a place in these various segments, like that people would not otherwise known. Mm-hmm. And so that leads me to ask, and we'll start wrapping up here, is where do you see Ham Radio 2.0? What are your next projects? I mean, that you've got on tap, and or are you just winging it?
Well, I traditionally I have been winging it, but when I started doing this full time last year, I started to get a little bit more focused, and that's always the challenge. It's always the challenge. Okay, what do I need to do next? What do I need to focus on? What do I need to try to do that either A, something someone else hasn't done yet, or B, maybe somebody else tried it and they didn't expand on it, or that I can expand it in a different direction they did, or something like that. So, it's hard to say. I think that a lot of these adjacent communities are going to be a good thing to do. What I would like to do is I would like to set up some of the most popular videos on my channel ever since day one are my technician and general class videos. I got one of the I'm a member of several clubs locally here, but one of the most active clubs is the Hearst Amateur Radio Club. Their website is w5hrc.org. And they have allowed me to record their technician class and the general class for the last 2 cycles, because the question pool renews every 4 years. So we recorded technician class, and then 3 years later it expired. We recorded it again. It lasted 4 years, and that technician class will expire about this time next year. So they've allowed, and I put those up, and those videos are good for 4 years. Because it's the same question pool, same question and answers, and everybody can go watch it today. And it was still just as relevant as it was a year and a half ago when I put it up there. So I would like to do something like that for the Jeep community, or for the overlanding community, or for the such and such community, or somebody like that, and say, okay, well, this is going to be, like the videos on my channel target everybody, just anybody on YouTube, go watch this video. But then I want to do something like, okay, this is specifically for off-roaders in the Jeep community, or this is specifically for preppers who like to do XYZ or whatever, stuff like that. So I kind of see myself going and doing a little bit of that. I'm not a good teacher. I'm a good administrator. All the classes on my channel, someone else taught them. All I did was point the camera in the right direction and edit them after the fact. But I could, if I guess I could challenge myself and maybe teach a class here and there, or at least recruit somebody to teach a class, then we could go out somewhere and teach a class specifically for this group of people. And it's all about getting people more interested in ham radio, really. So, so I see myself going that way. I would like to do some more de-expeditions. Those are always fun, and they get a lot of attention, just traveling to new countries, traveling to new islands, whatever, and doing stuff like that. And just doing stuff that, again, my tagline is, what is new in amateur radio? A lot of the stuff that's new in amateur radio is new to me. So I have to go learn it first before I can do a video about it. And that's the challenge that I like myself.
Well, it's really cool talking to you, especially after knowing you for about the last 6 years or so, and just watching this channel blossom. Early in the interview, you stated that, you have this entrepreneurial bent. Well, I got to tell you, my friend, you've got it. And it's really cool to see what you've been doing. I mean, I've looked at in your videos, you're promoting the ham radio community, all the different players in the game. You're showing people the where to get licensed. Yeah, and you're also there you
Guess
go.
where I got that?
Yeah,
I ordered that sitting at your booth in 2019.
So you're taking massive action, huh?
That's right, buddy.
you are. No, I can tell. I can tell that probably had an impact. I wasn't going to say that book did anything for you, because I didn't know if you'd gotten it, but I can say the same. That is really cool. No, it's really neat what you're doing, and that's why you are a true ham radio heavyweight. And this show is to feature a guy like yourself. Mm-hmm. Hey, folks. This is Jason Johnston. He's got a great show called Ham Radio 2.0. It's on YouTube. You're going to have the link in the show notes here. And he is KC5HWB. Great dude. He's in Grapevine, Texas. Glad to have him on the show today. Jason, you take care, my friend. It's great to see you again, and best wishes in 2021 with your channel. You're doing great.
Cool, man. I hope to see you guys in Huntsville, Ron. Thank you for the opportunity today.